Hello everyone, this is Umair Qureshi, one and only UQ from EdTalk Live with my wonderful colleague and friend Tammy. Hi Tammy.
Hi, Umair. Hi, Monica.
So again, we are here with another wonderful show with a wonderful guest with us. And let me tell you one thing: this show is EdTalk Live with UQ and Tammy, and this is a collaborative project of Pakistan ASCD and Emerging Leaders ASCD affiliate group. So, Tammy, tell us who is with us today.
We are very lucky to have landed Monica Burns, who is an EdTech consultant. Monica is traveling all of the time, so we've managed to find a Sunday where she's at home and we can have a bit of time to chat with her. So Monica and I have been good friends for a number of years. We've met when we were teaching in New York City together. And over the time that she was teaching at the school, we got some one-to-one iPad devices. And so through using them in her classroom, that became an interest to her. And then she kind of took that and grew it into her EdTech empire that she has today. And I mean empire in the sense that she's got a huge number of followers. She's everywhere speaking and doing demos and working with teachers and kids. So, and has written books and all sorts of things. So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. So Monica, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding some time on your schedule.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you. So just tell us a little bit about where your passion started with bringing or working with EdTech with kids.
So I taught in New York City with Tammy, which is always lovely to be on with you to talk about that, right? So my origin story, you were there for in that sense of being a classroom teacher in a traditional public school. We became a magnet school for environmental stewardship, and part of that transition was a commitment to using technology in the classroom. So we were able to go one-to-one with iPads, not the first school to do it, but pretty early on with going one-to-one with those types of devices. And then I had an opportunity to start sharing and speaking, which turned into blogging and writing about the use of education technology in the classroom. I have a book from ASCD, so it's really exciting to be with both of you and lovely all the ASCD connections. So it's been a really wonderful few years now, both inside and now outside of the classroom, spending a lot of time in other people's classrooms with their students and traveling around to different schools and regional events to talk about best practices for the use of technology in education.
Awesome, thank you. So you started, well, as we both did in our school, we go back to like 2007, I think we started teaching together, and we didn't have one-to-one when either of us started in the school. So you and I have worked with a device in a classroom, and now I know you work in a variety of schools in different places with different sets of teachers and students. So how do you kind of leverage that one device environment, which might not be as common anymore, but it still exists? So what advice do you give teachers who just have a device or two, but how do you really maximize teaching with an EdTech tool with that limitation?
Yeah, so just last week, I was in North Carolina for a district event where there were folks from all across the district, and they had a variety of situations where some were sharing Chromebook carts throughout the day, or they had one projection screen attached to an interactive whiteboard, and others had a device for every student all the time. So there's such a mix of environments that are out there and available, even if it's a school that's just a few miles away from another school. So when I'm out sharing best practices and resources, I really try my best to bring people items that are free. So at least free to get started so that you can get a feel for what the potential might be if you're scaling, to bring in things that work in collaborative settings and not just collaborative like a Google Doc where everyone has their own device and can type in from different places, but where students can sit side by side, they can share a screen, they can talk about their experiences in real time as they're recording their voice to make a movie or making a decision about what they're going to pull into a project they're working on, as well as things that might just work out very well on the big screen, is what I usually call it, of a classroom. So if you have a projection screen and you're showcasing a 360 image that you can look back and forth of a setting before reading a story, right? Even something like that with just one device could be very transformative. And teachers that might only have something kind of in their pocket, right, that they've maybe invested in, or they want to bring their smartphone, right, into a conversation too. There's things that they can do when it comes to researching, when it comes to note taking, organizing, that might fall more into an ease and efficiency kind of category, but is definitely valuable as well.
Thank you. Very helpful. I think having seen kind of that growth over time too, with, just having the one device, and then even just being able to use our smartphones, like you mentioned, is really valuable. I use the Google Translate all the time at my school. So that's just one of the things, I kind of just grab it and use it. So that's been really helpful. Mary, you've got some upper level questions. Oh, we can't hear you. Your microphone. Yep. Oh, there we go. Yep. Okay.
Sorry, my mic was mute. Okay. So thank you very much, Monica, once again joining the show. And EdTech is a buzzing word in Pakistan these days. When I look at my local circumstances, and it's a buzzing word everywhere actually these days. So people are striving to bring EdTech in classrooms, and they face challenges as well. I'm sorry. So my question is, in many parts of the world, there is a disconnection of academia and industrial demand of skilled manpower. How do you look at this, and what do you suggest to reconnect them?
So I think that there's some of those same issues are present, in the United States, where most of my work primarily takes place, where there is, conversations happening about what are we teaching, and then what are students going to need to be able to do, right, when they actually leave a classroom. And so a focus that, I often bring into conversations is around problem solving, around creative thinking. So things that are not necessarily, right, just the content in the textbook, as much as the skills to make sense of that, and the skills to make sense of what's happening in the world that might not be part of a traditional curriculum if we are working off of that. So the more that students are able to participate in activities that go beyond just a recall, right, or a quizzing of their knowledge of information, and the more that they can participate in hands-on activities, collaborative learning experiences, tackling problems, evaluating sources, right, all these sort of skills that are very transferable, right, beyond a classroom into more of those work and life situations that you're mentioning, right, are front and center. I think the better in terms of making sure that those pieces are threaded into the decisions that are being made around the organization of curriculum.
So let's talk about more. Let's talk more about EdTech, and EdTech is a very recent idea. Now, the majority of the teachers are from conventional background. We know that. Like we hardly get, I guess, 2% fresh blood in this profession every year. So because the teachers are from the conventional background, though they are trying to change, but still they take EdTech as an element which is hard to use while planning lessons and activities. What is your advice for them?
Well, it's interesting having worked with pre-service teachers and new teachers, as well as veteran teachers. I find that it's often the teachers with 5, 10, 15, 25 years experience that have the most wonderful aha moments when it comes to how I can really leverage this sort of technology into something that I've always done. Maybe it's always worked, but I know I can energize or elevate it. Or maybe it's always worked for 75% of my students, and now I know that it can help bring in technology to reach the rest of the students in my class. So although new teachers often have, right, some proficiency with using devices as a personal tool, when it comes to that professional proficiency, that ability to have a context to say, oh, this could really work in this situation, is really important. And I think it's something that teachers with experience really bring to the table in conversations around ed tech, even if the buttons or the logistics of bringing something in might be a little bit of a hurdle for someone who's does not feel personally confident, right, using technology with their level of proficiency. Their expertise from a content and pedagogical standpoint, right, are something that really can be leveraged as well. So when I do talk with teachers who may be struggling with those pieces, especially the kind of intimidation or confidence factor of bringing in something new or dealing with the time management for structuring something, I really try and focus in on what's working really well, right? What's on the curriculum map that is not going to leave, right? What we've always done, and then having conversations around that to really honor those experiences, and then think about ways that we can, right, elevate it and make sure we're reaching everyone and making things as relevant and connected and transferable for students as possible.
That's great. That's great. Tammy, I got one question before you move on with your question.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's something suddenly popped in my mind.
Yeah.
The question is, when I look at my local conditions and in many countries as well, still in schools, the schools find it very convenient to suddenly ban all the gadgets, like the mobile phones and the iPads and everything. So, what do you think? What do you suggest to those schools? I mean, the major fear is that the students will be distracted during their formal learning procedures in the classrooms. So, what do you suggest to the schools? What should they do? Should they ban the devices and the gadgets like that, or they should find some alternatives to use them properly? I just wanted to know your opinion about it.
So I'm always wary of kind of outright bans or things that might feel too extreme on one side or the other side, right? Where, we do
Yeah.
know that devices are distracting. I'm sitting here with my phone on my desk, but I have it turned over so I won't notice anything that pops up, right? Because we all get distracted when we have all different things going on. So, that being said, I think there's a time and a place for everything. That balance is really important. And then more and more, I think it's becoming a responsibility of all the adults in a child's life to model good behavior when it comes to that balance and making choices. And if we don't give students an opportunity to try things out and practice that own balance right inside of the classroom, then when is that going to happen? So if we outright ban everything altogether, we're missing out on a lot, not just the access that kids can have to quick answers to quick questions or collaborative opportunities for someone who might be far away or sharing on social. We're also taking away this opportunity for them to understand the benefits of having easy access to something, but then also the need to be able to prioritize and not be distracted right throughout the day as well. So although there's plenty of times and moments where I think it's quite all right to say, we need to keep these in our bags, let's clear off our desk of this item because we're really focused on this one thing right now, like making eye contact while we're having a conversation with someone sitting next to us,
Yeah.
right? And we need to practice that a little bit better. But for the most part, I'm a little cautious of saying that anything should be 100% in all the time or 100% out all the time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tammy.
Yeah, that just makes me think too, when you put, especially when you've got little kids in the classroom, elementary school kids, and you're getting out the math manipulatives or something, and you put them on the desk and you tell them not to touch them. But, it's okay to let them have that few minutes of exploratory time. I always think of like when you put out connecting cubes or pattern blocks or whatever, just giving them that just that couple of minutes before you start to get it out of the system is just so helpful. It just changes how the rest of your time goes in that learning opportunity. So it's the same with the device, even though they can, be that rabbit hole of time suckage. But anyway, so can pattern blocks.
I think Tammy, the fountain pen has gone through the same evolution. I mean, people used to use the feathers to write write on the notebooks, and then
Yeah.
pen came in, and people has gone through the whole evolution. I
Yeah. Yeah.
guess it's just my guessing. So
Yeah.
EdTech
You
is
got,
going through the same thing.
yeah, pens with the different color inks in them,
Yeah,
lead
Mhm.
pencils that you change the lead out. Like there's always something, right?
yeah.
So just different kind of technology.
Mhm.
So Monica, you were talking about modeling good use of technology and distractions and things like that. And through this whole process of you kind of growing out yourself as a consultant and an app reviewer and a blogger and all of these things, you've tried out tons and tons of tools in terms of like apps and devices and all of that. And you've done some really amazing things and written about a lot. Can you, which I think, is an important model for teachers and students because you're trying this stuff out and letting people know how it is. So I know this is going to be hard to answer, but what are some of your favorite tools that you've learned about over time?
So I really love tools that are open-ended. So yes, there's something wonderful about adaptive software that can use artificial intelligence to figure out what students need next, right? I get it. I love it, right? I value that. That being said, I'm most excited about open-ended creation tools where there isn't a right button to press, where students have a lot of flexibility, where they could make a movie that's a science lab report. They could make a book trailer. They could make a persuasive piece of, maybe a public service announcement. So I'm a big fan of the Adobe Spark tools. I've worked with them for some time, right? So a little partial there. And I have a book all about lesson ideas for creativity in the classroom with Adobe Spark. So I love those because they're free. They work with Chromebooks and iPads. You can use it really on any device you want. So those ones with the movie making, with Spark Video, Spark Page, with the website creation, I get really excited for something like that. I also love tools that take formative assessment and change the way we might think about it normally. Something like Flipgrid, where students can use video responses, or a back channel where kids can type and chat, just like someone watching this video, right, can leave comments as we're talking at the same time. So those are the kind of things that I get really energized about because there's so many use cases. And working with K-12 teachers across content areas, not only does it make my life easier, but it makes everyone a lot happier when they can see a way that they can use a tool in their classroom, and a teacher down the hall who has different content and different grade level could also use that tool, and they can talk about it and still plan and support each other.
Yeah, I like that, how you can really plan vertically then, because if you're using the same tool, just different content, it's not that as much of a deal as the focusing on the content. And so just thinking about that and all of those things that you've learned in your journey, and your busy schedule, and you're doing keynotes and presentations and all of those things. So of course you're doing learning in that journey. So what is it that you do to focus on your specific professional growth needs? Like, do you build it into your schedule, or do you just know that something's going to come out of a conference, or how do you do that for yourself?
So I do a lot of reading and podcast listening, and I find that that's something that's been really great for my professional learning, just continuing that on. I finished my doctorate, I guess, about 2 years ago now, so that sort of more formal type of education is not something I'm participating in right now, but I will sign up for online courses that I'll jump in and out of. I use Facebook groups that I follow and will peek into to see what people are excited about or what struggles they're having, or a place where I might pose a question. But I definitely carve out time for reading, knowing that I'm someone who is better off having a 3 or 4 hour block on a Saturday morning than reading an hour each night before bed, right? So really understanding what that looks like for me and being reflective, I think, is important. And then there are, a handful of podcasts that I listen to, really, inside and outside of the industry. And that helps me connect with some big things that I think, might connect to what I do. And for something like that, whether I was driving across North Carolina last week, all right, I was on an airplane to Texas last week, and that's an opportunity for me to plug in, listen to an hour-long podcast, and that helps a lot as well.
Yeah, awesome.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. So, Monica, with that said, what is your advice to the teachers who are afraid of technology and taking their own learning forward?
So one thing I always like to share, especially when I do presentations that might feature, 12 or 15 or 25 apps and websites, is that it's not about doing everything in order to do it right. You really want to focus on quality over quantity. So if there's a teacher who's just getting started, is trying to figure out the best way to go about it, right? You having just 2 or 3 things in your tool belt that you can use in another 2 or 3 ways is going to really maximize the time you invest and spend learning how something works and thinking about how it could work within your learning environment. The kind of comparison I always, often give when working with teachers is if your tool belt is full of 50 different apps, it's going to be too heavy. It's going to hit the floor. You won't be able to reach anything, right? Just put a couple things you can grab and go with, and that way you can really make the most of your time.
That's true. Right. So before we head off, tell us about the places people can learn from all of your work. You have a number for ways of teachers to learn from you.
Yeah, so my blog, classtechtips.com, is where I share several times a week a new podcast episode. So my podcast, the Easy EdTech podcast, which was launched earlier this year, those blog posts are up on, those podcast episodes are up on my blog. So you can find them there along with blog posts. My event schedule is there. So I'm very excited to be a featured voice at ISTE in Philadelphia just next week, with plenty of other events before and after leading up to that as well. But I also try my best to share, to snap pictures and share on Instagram, or to tweet out things I'm excited about too. So any of those places, with classtechtips.com really being the landing page to connect with me.
That's great. So before we go off air, tell me, we have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of questions coming in my mind every when you get such a wonderful educator with us. I want to ask one thing. In my country, in Pakistan especially, and I don't know about Singapore. Singapore is much more advanced. Tell me, you know about it. So in my country, there are companies who come up with the edtech solutions. They come up with the apps. There are many people. But what we observe here, some of those companies, not all, but some of those companies, without realizing the hardcore instructional problems, I mean the problems that are faced by the teachers. We don't have all the teachers from the urban areas. We do have the teachers from the rural areas, remote areas, and from high poverty regions as well. There's a lot of diversity. So those companies come up with the very fancy and with very expensive sort of apps at times. What do you think? Do you suggest that the educators who are the hardcore educators should jump in as the edtech experts, or we should outsource this part of education to the companies and to the organizations who rarely have entered in a classroom? How do you look at this situation?
So it's, there's a wonderful role that people play as early adopters to be able to try something out, to feel for whether or not something is ready, and to scale. So I think that having partnerships with schools and organizations that are ready to try something out and provide feedback is a really interesting model that's popular here in the States as well. I mean, there's definitely things to consider in terms of products being ready to handle data privacy, what it means for a school to provide that sort of access to their students, and what families and parent permission looks like, right, for participating in those sort of pilots. So, there's definitely benefits to being an early adopter, to piloting new technology, but there are definitely things to consider when it comes to privacy, and when it comes to making sure we're using everyone's time effectively.
That's good. That's good. Tammy, you had to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just thinking off of your question now, I can't speak for local schools here in Singapore, but at most of the international schools, I would think, they have their own in-house digital literacy person, coordinator or something like that. So they do have, if they're onboarding some kind of website or program or whatever that requires some kind of devices or software or anything like that, they do all the troubleshooting, which is really helpful. Just thinking back to when we were in New York, we didn't have a person like that. So it was really us trying to figure out some things, working with outside consultants, but those outside people not knowing, any of us really, the staff or the students. But you do have to try things out to see what works. So, I guess that's why you get some funding for pilot programmings, and you figure out what might be things that you take forward or not. But I think, I feel like probably a lot of schools are in the same place right now, Monica, that you're in, or what kind of range do you see?
So there's a huge range in terms of adoption, of proficiency, of excitement, of where leadership is, right, around all of these pieces. And it's interesting because I don't necessarily see patterns that are based on geography, right? So there's pockets all across the states here, schools that I'm working with. I don't see pockets that necessarily relate to schools that are more rural or more urban either, right? So I would say that probably the biggest trend in terms of success stories that I see has more to do with leadership, and then providing a culture of support for people to try out things new the first time without feeling like there's consequences for if something goes wrong, or something that they're going to be worried about. So those pieces are the ones that I notice the most when it comes to what levels of support look like, whether it's commitment to having a digital learning specialist, whether it's commitment to professional learning that isn't just a one-day event. And that's where I see a lot of success.
Yeah, thank you. So we're getting to our half-hour point. Did we have any questions or comments on the feed, Umair? I can't see. The new interface is very small to look at, so
people are just silently watching us.
Okay, that's fine too.
I think I take it as mesmerization. So we have
Yes, it's a lot to take in. So Monica, as we wrap up the show, then, do you have a favorite quote that you share with people for whatever reason, related to tech or not, or learning?
So there's a quote that I share often when talking about this idea of tasks before apps, right? My book for ASCD, about empowering students as creators so that they can go off and tell their story no matter what it is, especially for moments where they might not see storytellers that look or sound like them. And so there's a quote from St. Catherine of Siena that says, be who you're created to be and you will set the world on fire. So that for me is one that I like to share or remember, that, the more opportunities we give kids to tell the story of their learning, right, really the better, just in terms of what we are looking to do here long-term, right, with EdTech is empower students, is make sure they are prepared and ready for the world of now. And I think that's one way we can frame it when talking to educators.
Yeah, that's very, very powerful and very suitable for sure. Any other questions from you, Umair?
I have a lot of questions. I will. I am just, it's a debate that goes on for hours and hours.
Yeah.
But one question, Monica, you know it, and obviously no one can know better than you. US has a lot of diversity. So some states are very receptive towards technology, and I do have some guessing that some states are a bit reluctant. So how do you address these challenges? Like, fine, it's wonderful if someone accepts the technology immediately, and the ones who are not accepting it, I mean the community, the parents, how do you deal with those people?
I think it's really about providing context as much as possible. So for someone who might be a little skittish or a little unsure, oftentimes that is more related to some gaps in just understanding of what the potential is, as opposed to having a full picture and still feeling like something is not going to be a good fit. I think if we honor that balance, if we listen and acknowledge the frustrations or concerns that someone has, the more, we're set up in a situation where we can communicate some of the benefits while still making sure everyone feels valued, because we value their opinion and we know where they're coming from, and that they have, their child or their students' best interest in mind first and foremost. So acknowledging that, and then moving forward to have some conversations around the context for where, we're looking to bring something in, can really help continue a conversation in a productive manner.
Right. So time to wrap up and go off here. Tammy, you have to say
Thank
anything?
you. Well, I like you have a lot of things to ask and say, but I chat with Monica often, so I'll just ask her then.
Yeah.
And we're getting
Thank
into
Yeah.
our
So
evening.
for having me. I really appreciate, this invitation to talk and chat about these pieces. And I know we can continue the discussion offline, right, on social and all those places
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's
that's
a good
wonderful.
way to model use of EdTech collaboratively across the globe.
That's
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks very
So,
much, Monica.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monica, for being with us. And for the audience who didn't ask the questions today, you can ask the questions later as well. So Monica will be tagged in this video, and if Monica you get time, you can give the replies to the people. And this show will be uploaded to our YouTube channel as well. Don't forget subscribing to our channel, where the show will be there and the previous shows will be there as well. We try to bring the best voices from the world who are doing the greatest jobs in education. Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Monica.